Thank you very much. We are starting now. First of all, let me call upon the Vice Chancellor to open today's event, which is in celebration of the Africa Month. May I hand over to the Vice Chancellor, please?
Can you hear me?
Very well.
Fantastic, fantastic. You look amazing, by the way. I can see all of you on stage. You look very colorful and amazing. I hear that it's very cold out there, and it's good to see you looking so good, even in the cold. I wish I were there to connect with you face to face, spirit to spirit, eye to eye. But I'm here now in the UK, been working with the colleagues at the University of Bristol. And this week I've been at the University of Cambridge, and now I'm in London to connect with UCT UK Trust. Of course, throughout the time here, I've also been engaging with UCT alumni, as well as the UCT community in the UK. But we celebrate Africa Day nevertheless. So Jambo, Dumelang, Sanbonani, Molweni, Molo. I'm including the greetings in Kiswahili today for two reasons. The first one is that the University of Cape Town is celebrating Africa Day with the theme language and music as agents of liberation and continental integration. The second reason is that Kiswahili is now the official language of the African Union, and it will soon be introduced at UCT as a program of study with my full support. When the dean came with this vision, I thought extremely timely, and we must do it. And we are going to proceed with it. I want you to know that the dean has got my full support. All I'm waiting for is for the dean to press the button, and the faculty, we get on and run and do it. For centuries, South Africa has welcomed different European languages. It is about time that we do the same for the languages of our continent. Becoming fluent in Swahili is one way to reclaim our identity as Africans. Note that I didn't say it's the only way. I said it's one way. And I invite each of us to commit ourselves to learning at least one phrase in an African language that is unfamiliar to you. If you can make it one phrase a month, it's even better, because by the end of the year, you might be able to say a paragraph more decently. We need to celebrate all the languages on this continent, because our cultural diversity makes Africa so vibrant and exciting. And we need to celebrate that. It wasn't so long ago that our oppressors, our colonizers, used ethnicity, tribalism, and language to divide us. By focusing on the differences between us, we should go beyond that. Every time you want to use ethnicity, language, or tribalism to divide, note that you are doing exactly what the colonizers and our oppressors that came after the colonizers in some countries did to us. We have so much more in common as African people, and we need to celebrate that rather than to use the little differences that are there between us to separate us. I encourage all of you today here at UCT to attend our first panel discussion of the day. And it is titled Swahili as a Language of Liberation and Integration on the Continent, featuring panelists from UCT's Humanities faculty, as well as Professor Aldin Mutembei, who holds a chair as the Mwalimu Julius Nyerere Professor in Kiswahili at the University of Dar es Salaam. And at 2 o'clock today, you can help celebrate the legacy of Miriam Makeba with a special tribute performance by the UCT Big Band, followed by a panel discussion on jazz's contribution to the struggles for liberation on the continent. Our panelists will include Judith Sipuma, who's a UCT alum, Dr. Leta Mbulu, Nikiwe Bikisha, who's also a UCT alum, Tandiswa Mazwai, who also went past UCT, and Dr. Gcina Mhlophe. And let me pause here as we prepare to get into that session this afternoon, to acknowledge the power of team, the idea of collaborating in this way to celebrate the legacy of Miriam Makeba came through a conversation at the launch of Meba Bramasekela's book. And it was in a conversation between me and Shadow Twala. And we're talking about this contribution and how Africa, how music actually played a role in the struggle for liberation on the continent. And I said to Sis Shadow that she must talk to Libo. I want us to do it. And Libo Msenga Nabam in our Department of Development and Alumni Development will make it happen. And she spoke to Libo, and boom, we went. And I said to Libo, we collaborate with the Faculty of Humanities and make it happen. Look where we are now. We are here because of the power of team. This is why we're celebrating Africa Day in this way. I would like us in the years that follow that we collaborate with each of the faculties to celebrate Africa Day, because Africa Day, during Africa Day or Africa Month, we should show the strength of Africa in all the areas of the faculties, the disciplines that all our faculties are focusing on. This year is humanities, and I hope next year we get another faculty that collaborates with us in the OVC to celebrate Africa Day. Just as 5 African countries adopted versions of the Pan-African Liberation Song, Nkosisikelele Africa is the national anthems, I want to encourage all of us to embrace the heritages of our continent and the people who express those heritages. Let's not see ourselves as separate. Whether as disciplines, we encourage interdisciplinarity. As Africans, we are one Africa. We are one people. So let's come together. I mean, it's great that some African countries have got, are using the Pan-African Liberation Song as national anthem. We could actually do more like that together as African countries. And this year's Africa Day celebration at UCT, we are hosting it, is hosted together with the Faculty of Humanities, the South African College of Music, and International Day South Africa. We, International Jazz Day South Africa, will do that more and more as we move along in the following years to celebrate Africa Day. Please enjoy Africa Day or Africa Month to its fullest. This is not the only time we celebrate being African. We celebrate it each day. But during this month, we make it even more pronounced. We cast a spotlight on different aspects of strength that come from the African continent that we can contribute to the world. So I wish you everything of the best today as we cast a spotlight on language and music. And thank you to the Faculty of Humanities for leading this celebration with us. Enjoy the celebration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Vice Chancellor. Let me try something here. One heart, what about one heart?
One love.
Yes. It's about time we celebrate our languages, as the Vice Chancellor has said. And Africans actually identify with music. Hence today, UCT, in collaboration with the International Jazz Day, South Africa, have decided to host this big event of celebrating Africa Month. We know that Africans, when they are happy, they sing. When they are sad, they sing. Protest, they sing. Music is everything that has ever made sense to the Africans. An African child can sing and dance, as early as, in their months, because the mothers sing lullaby for them. So music It's what identifies us as Africans, is what we know best, is our therapy. Remember, we never had, Africans didn't never have psychologists and everything, but what they did was to run to music. Hence, it is very important today that we're celebrating Africa Month in collaboration with the Jazz, International Jazz Band. And the topic of today is language and music as agents of liberation and continental integration, because I told you, the only thing that binds Africans together has been music. The only thing that made sense to Africans has been music. And this music has been as a result of our heritage, our orality of, we are oral people. The reason why we can still continue with our legacy or our traditions is because they've been handed down from generation to generation through music, through word of mouth. So that is why it's very important. Today, as you see here next to me, we have some discussions, interesting discussions that are going to deal on language and music. And I am going to read briefly their bios. I'm going to start with Prof. Mtembe, just to know who he is and where he comes from. So, Prof. Aldin Mtembe holds a chair as the Mwalimu Julius Nyerere Professor in Kiswahili at the University of Dar es Salaam. He arrived here yesterday. We blessed. Thank you, Prof, for being here. Karibu. Karibu. He is a former director of the Institute of Kiswahili Studies and the current Tanzanian director of Confucius Institute at the University of Dar es Salaam. He teaches Kiswahili/African literature, communication, literary theories, and orature, and Kiswahili languages to spoken of other languages. He is a literary writer with 4 books. His published theory in Kiswahili on literary criticism has gained a wide recognition in colleges and universities. He is one of the founders of East Africa Swahili Teachers Association and former board members of the Global Association for the Promotion of Swahili Language. He is an active member of ICALAN, Specialized Institute of African Union, a mandate to develop and promote African languages. Maybe you know the reason why he's here. He has traveled widely to give keynote speeches to various academic institutions in Africa, Europe, Asia, and America. Prof, there have been questions from my students to say, why is it that science can only be delivered in English and not in indigenous languages, while indigenous languages are very rich and African people are very rich in the knowledge of science. But then, when they try to do some research to find out if there's any African language that has been used, even by scholars, you and I, to write, or all this information in the indigenous languages, they found none. So, as somebody who is advocating for African languages to make sure that, the theories, everything is written, and that I think you'll be in a better position to respond to that question. Ladies and gentlemen, can we give Prof a round of applause as he comes closer to give us his address?
Good morning. Habari za asubuhi? The answer is nzuri. That is good morning, and that is nzuri. Because today is also a day we are celebrating African Day. We are celebrating African languages, and we are trying to also see the interface with language and music. I will start with a very song that I sang. I was taught when I was in primary school, and that gave me a sense of nationalism, but also a sense of belonging as an African. It's not easy to translate a poem, but I'll try. Afadhali kuwa na taifa ambalo halina silaha za kisasa, lakini lina vijana wa kishujaa, kuliko kuwa na taifa lenye silaha za kisasa, lakini vijana wake ni waoga. Meaning, it is better to have a nation that does not have sophistication weapons, but has brave youth, than having a nation with very sophisticated weapons, but has sluggish and fearful youth. That song gave me the power to be what I am. Swahili is one of the languages in East Africa. It's a lingua franca in East Africa, meaning 7 countries: Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, and now DRC. Also, the language is taught in different universities around the globe, and is a very popular language in media houses within and outside Africa. Given its importance and the status of its use, in 1985, Kiswahili was recognized by the then African Organization of African Unity, OAU, and was celebrated and declared one of its official languages. It was not until 2004 when the President Joaquim Chissano, then president from Mozambique, used it in an official meeting to address the forum. In 2019, the language was recognized and declared one of the official languages of Southern Africa Development Community, SADC. And recently, the United Nations Education, Science, and Culture Organization, UNESCO, in its 41st meeting of member countries held in Paris, France, in 23rd November 2021, declared Swahili July 7th each year to be the World Swahili Language Day. The declaration makes Swahili the first African language to gain such an international status. And finally, in February this year, the African Union has finally officially adopted Swahili as an official working language, joining Arabic, English, French, and Portuguese. I would like now to contextualize the road taken by Kiswahili as the language of liberation, starting from the 7th of July, 1957. From here, I will examine its role as the language of African integration. I would argue that the deliberate efforts were taken by several visionary African leaders, both in Africa and in the diaspora, to alleviate the status of Kiswahili language. Among them are Mwalimu Nyerere, himself once a Swahili teacher, Kwame Nkrumah, who saw Kiswahili's potential as the language of African unity. By the way, Ghana is the first African country to start teaching Kiswahili at the university level, not even Tanzania. And Maulana Karenga, from the African diaspora, who proposed Kiswahili to be the language of identity for African Americans. There could be no better words to explain the proposition of Kiswahili in the diaspora than those given by Beverly Coleman, professor in the United States in 1971, when she said, I quote, I wish to explain that I do not intend to defend its status either in the United States or on the continent of Africa. It is its existence and relevance to Black people asks for no defense and needs none. It has risen to the position of being one of the world's fastest spreading and most versatile languages on its own merit. It has been chosen the lingua franca of Tanzania back in time. I would modify here saying East Africa, and adopted as a sort of model African language by Afro-Americans for the same reason. The growing world status of Swahili neither competes for or nor precludes the importance or international possibilities of any other African language. Let it suffice to say that just as Black people are among the dynamic forces presently influencing the destiny of the world, so Swahili is. Therefore, it is important that we understand exactly what it is and how and why it has come from among us and how Black people are relating to its presence. That is Coleman Bavary, 1971, quoted in her famous book, page 25 to 20, 13 to 25. Today, Kiswahili is estimated to have more than 250 million speakers. I have statistics here based on 2017 census in the DRC, Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, South Sudan, Rwanda, and Burundi. And then I have also statistics here from Zambia, Malawi, Mozambique, Comoro, Mayotte, Madagascar, and parts of South Africa, totaling 224. Outside Africa, there could be as many as 25 million Kiswahili speakers scattered all over the world, given the fact that it is the most studied African language in colleges, universities, and other education institutions in Europe, America, and Asia. As I mentioned earlier, since 1963, African Americans have chosen Swahili to be the language of their identity. But then, what is it that makes Kiswahili the language of liberation? Mulokozi 2015 starts this subject by saying that Africa is the only continent divided into blocks carrying European languages. Africa is the only continent divided into blocks carrying foreign languages labels, with us of Anglophone, Francophone, and Lusophone Africa as acceptable identities. Rarely does one hear, for instance, Swahiliphone, Nguniphone, Hausaphone, or Mandaphone Africa. This identification of Africa with the foreign, specifically European languages, has a long history which is intertwined with the slavery, colonialism, neocolonialism, and the quest for Pan-Africanism. Liberation as a concept should start from here. As Fanon would have put it, what is needed first and foremost is the mental liberation. And in Ngugi, to put it in Ngugi Adhiongo's words, decolonizing the mind is all what it entails for one to start the road to liberation. The contemporary role of Kiswahili as the language of liberation starts 7th July 1954. This marks the day when, during that time, the political party TANU meeting, it was declared that Swahili was going to be the language to first unite all Tanganyikans and secondly, fight for independence. Shrewdly, Kiswahili was chosen among 150 languages of Tanzania for those who, for the two noble roles, to unite Tanganyikans and fight for their independence. The union between Tanganyika and Zanzibar to form Tanzania in 1964 found a fertile ground already cleared by the social linguistics unity through Kiswahili language. And as such, there is no Tanzania without Kiswahili, and the latter's role of liberation has continued within and outside Tanzania. So briefly, we have three stages of liberation: the mental and cultural liberation, where language, you start with language, and the art and music. Here you construct the identity. And then you have social and political liberation, where language again, education and religion, etc. Here we are talking about gaining independence. And then you have economic liberation, language again, business and trade. There you will be able to stand and be counted. In every stage, language is there as a vehicle to the realization of a liberation. But it is also there to construct a reality at every stage. At the mental and cultural liberation stage, Kiswahili was used to reconstruct the African persona. Using African sayings, idioms, and proverbs, Kiswahili at this stage has continued to role to its role of mental liberation. Kiswahili has succeeded in building Ubuntu among Africans and continue to construct the African identity through African and other homegrown philosophies. Sayings like, mtu ni watu, a person is people, or mtu ni utu, a person is humanoid, etc., serve to remind Africans of the necessity of unity among themselves. Thus, we have phrases like umoja ni nguvu, unity is power, uhuru na umoja, freedom and unity, becoming African rather than remaining to be seen as Swahili phrases. At the social and political liberation, Kiswahili became the voice of the liberation struggle. Freedom fighters from almost every corner of colonized Africa then, who came for training in Tanzania, learned and became fluent in Kiswahili. Kiswahili became the language of the army and intelligentsia. The once commonly used 1, 2, 1, 2, about turn, became moja mbili, or moja mbili moja, nyuma geuka, changing from English to Kiswahili and slowly building into these young trainees a sense of African linguistic identity. When Mazrui narrated a popular documentary story of Africans, a triple heritage, one reality was conspicuously left out. He says that contemporary Africa is a result of 3 elements combined together. Whether this is unique to Africa, that's a debate for another day. But here we are concerned with one argument. By Africa's triple heritage, Mazrui meant indigenous tradition, Islamic religion, and cultural inputs, and Western religious and secular civilization. Before Mazrui, actually, Nkrumah had it when he said that post-colonial Africa was held to 3 heritages, namely indigenous, Islamic, and Euro-Christian. But then if through Western secular civilization came Western languages, Portuguese, English, and French, and through Islamic culture came Arabic language, what is the language for the indigenous African culture? Every heritage except the indigenous culture goes with the language. It is rather absurd that what is indigenous lacks a language, as though Africans did not or do not have languages. That is a missing reality. It is an area where mental and cultural liberation is urgently needed. To Africans, Kiswahili is playing this liberation role. At least it has successfully done so in East Africa and some parts of Central Africa. While the with AU adoption, it is one of its official languages. Kiswahili is spreading steadily to accomplish this role, this noble role as Africa's lingua franca. Africa is blessed with about 2,000 active languages. To linguists, this is not only a blessing, but multilingualism is a sign of linguistic wealth. As Pra and Brock-Whitney correctly put it, now the question should not be whether it is worth and practical for Africa to have one language, but rather, what does it take for Africa to have a voice in unison? To attempt to address this question, allow me, in conclusion, to examine the role of language as an agent of integration. I mean, Kiswahili as an agent of African integration. Integration is an interactive process and not easy to define. It is a process where people interact in a number of activities. It is a process of inclusion rather than exclusion. It brings a sense of togetherness where cultures converge without hierarchy and work to create a symbiotic new culture. Kalkul persuades me when he defines integration as a state of mind. One can think of multiple layers of integration: individual layer, environmental, societal, national, and universal layer. At the individual level, one must have integration with oneself. Your head must agree with your part of shoulders, your body and your heart, etc. At the environmental level, Omkar says one has to integrate fully with given environment outside self-existence. It is not possible to isolate oneself from the given environment, which is in turn integral part of life. Integration with the environment means to be one with nature, to be environmental friendly, to learn from it, to protect it, and to use it as a strong resource for the development of self. At the societal level, one has to be an integral and responsible part of society one is born in. And to fulfill its obligation at different level, that is what it takes at a societal level integration. At the national level, integration means to be one with the nation, to work for its welfare, prosperity, and development. With this in mind, let us see how Kiswahili made it in Tanzania and in East Africa. Tanzania, as I said, is multilingual, multi-ethnic, and multicultural state. According to the Language of Tanzania project, Tanzania has now 164 languages. Kiswahili became a linguistic no man's land. The nomenclature Swahili is of something to go by. If it's something to go by, speaks it all by calling it people of the coast. It is not an ethnic language, but rather a collection of dialects both from the coast but also from inland as far interior as from Congo. It grew out of necessity from trade, slavery, religious, administrative, political, and education. In post-independence Africa, it has developed with a conscious mind for use in cultural liberation, political gain, and educative purposes. Kiswahili has been used to unify people. It has been used to promote national consciousness. In schools, like the song I sang, Kiswahili was and still is used to solidify people's togetherness. As a weapon against imperialism, it made people see their commonality rather than differences. But I should emphasize here, like my earlier quotation from Beverly Coleman, in Tanzania, the growth and development of Kiswahili neither competes for nor precludes the importance of international possibilities of any other Tanzanian language. Nyerere did not kill other languages. He was a Zanaki speaker and spoke his mother language when at home with elders. Many people in rural areas still communicate with each other in their ethnic languages. Some of these languages are so developed to have their dictionaries, grammar books, and newsletters. In most such ethnic groups, people have their Bible, for instance, translated in their vernacular, and yet all are used and united through Kiswahili. The success of Tanzania was replicated in East African countries with some degree of success. The East African Swahili Teachers Association, Chakama, on one hand, and the Global Promotion of Kiswahili, Chaukidu, on the other, are ideological institutions used to spearhead the role of Kiswahili as an agent of African integration. Regional and international Swahili conferences that are done every year add to this linguistic struggle to have Africans unite. In the diaspora, the continuation of Kwanzaa Festival in the United States of America are an invaluable contribution to a positive role of Kiswahili as an agent of African integration. I want to conclude, ladies and gentlemen, by leaving with you an African proverb as food for thought. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, there's a saying which goes, wood may remain 10 years in the water, but it will never become a crocodile. The same expressed in Bambara in Mali, that no matter how long a log stays in water, it does not become a crocodile. Thank you very much.
Radamajita, yaba, 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 yaba. Ayaba, nobody wanna see us together. La la la, la 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 la. Ayaba. Imagine, we haven't seen each other, we don't know each other, but at least there's something that we share in common, that we all know, right? Right, yeah. Thank you very much, Prof, for very interesting presentation indeed. As you were presenting here, I've been thinking, what is so difficult with us here in South Africa having that one language that we see beyond, tribalism, ethnicity, why can't we have something like Kiswahili? But anyhow, yeah, it's food for thought, and it's something that when we talk about promoting our indigenous languages, which I think we currently busy trying to do as well here in South Africa, that will reach to a stage where we would have a language like Kiswahili. There are so many languages. I mean, so many people who are doing Kiswahili, speaking Kiswahili, and for us, we feel like it is a progress. We're going somewhere. If one of our own indigenous languages can make it to global, and then it means you are in the right direction. So what we have actually 4 panelists, I'm sure you saw from the program, but one of them is going to be virtual. But what we would do after the 3 panelists finished with their presentation, I'm going to take questions from you, and so that we can have some discussion. So if you have questions for Prof, just write them down or just keep them so that when our last speaker is done, then we can have that form of a discussion. So right now, I'm going to call upon Professor Moutinyani. Professor Moutinyani is an associate professor in the linguistic department and director of the Center of Advanced Studies of African Society, CASAS, downstairs here, in the arts faculty at the University of the Western Cape. She holds a PhD and MA in linguistics from University of Florida, US, and a BA in honors from University of Cape Town. Her primary area research in psycholinguistics, where she looked at language and speech development in relation to psychological process, in particular how children produce and comprehend language. Professor Moutinyani headed an NIHSS-funded catalytic project which examined how psycholinguistics research can guide some literacy practices among children who speak South African languages. The other aspect of this project was to find ways in which folklore can be used to encourage parental participation in developing literacy amongst children. She is currently co-editing a book with Dr. Posamogega based on this project. Other areas of research include morphosyntax, critical discourse analysis, and workplace multilingualism. Professor Moutinyani has published journal articles and book chapters in both her primary and secondary areas of research. Professor Moutinyani was part of us here at UCT, but she decided to ditch us and go to UWC. However, we still love her. That's why we still invite her to come and have this kind of celebration with us. Dr. Moutinyani, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Vice Chancellor, Professor Pageng, in your absence, Madam Chair, Dr. Posamogega, my sister, the Dean of Humanities, Prof. Casey, the team members at the back there, honorable guests, especially the Luhlaza and Fezeka students and teachers, fellow panelists, in the University of Cape Town. Thank you very much for this opportunity. At least I know I'm not a lost daughter. You still think of me, you still remember me. In any case, my blood, what runs in my blood is UCT. I'm a product of UCT, so it's always a pleasure for me to be part of what is happening at the institution. Like you've heard from introductions, I'm now at the University of the Western Cape, but I also direct the Center for Advanced Studies of African Society, which is just down the road here. So maybe at UWC, but I'm on UCT campus every day, so I'm still here. So when I was invited to come and talk about language and music as agents of liberation and continental integration, I thought I'll focus on language only, but then I thought, no, actually I have a much better story to tell, which combines both music and language. So one often wonders why it's possible to listen and enjoy music sung in a foreign language, and yet become very intolerant when hear people speaking a language that they do not understand. So for many years we listened to choral music, also known as the kwaere amakwayara, on radio and much later on television, and these were often sung in foreign languages, and we sang along and we enjoyed them. Even, I think some of you remember, around 1994, we saw and we had multitudes sing together at soccer and rugby matches to the tune of Shosholoza. So, and people never thought about the language and that's used and what the words actually mean, but they sang along nonetheless. And yet the same group of people will frown upon and struggle to pronounce an African name like Mantwa, like really, Mantao, Mantona, Mentwa. I don't know, I've stopped counting how many ways people say my name. And sometimes I think I should make them sing the name, then they'll remember how to say it. Growing up, we were often told that we can remember certain things by turning them into song. For example, I remember how we remembered colors of the spectrum. The Roy beef, I hope you know that, guys, since you are here. We sang that. We memorized, I'm not very good at memorizing, but if we sing, it's okay. We memorized the periodic table of elements. So I am a scientist also, because I still remember the elements. And when we make jokes, I usually say, people who don't fit in, I usually say elements of, that are not of the same category on the periodic table need to be ostracized. So usually when we talk and we want to be nasty to people, we would say something like that. And they won't get it, they'll just laugh with us. Yes, I also remember the law of cosines in mathematics, which I've forgotten by now, but I believe I can remember if my memory is rekindled through song. So, although our leaders and elders had no scientific evidence to support the belief that music and language have something that goes to the heart, we all can agree that there's a connection between language and song. We know that we can use the same spoken words, which is speech or language, in music. Until recently, scientists have been debating how listeners of music extract words from a single sound, which is music. According to Semler, we've made some progress. In 2020, speech and musical sounds are thought to differ in their acoustic structure and therefore activate different receptive preferences in the brain. So although it's the same words, it's the same language, when it's sung, it's it's received differently in the brain. Much closer to home, an MA thesis from Rhodes University examines the role of African choral music in preservation of identity, and this is by Atinko Sinelane, and he discusses how composers use their compositions as political tools and as mouthpieces to communicate societal issues of concern to the indigenous people during and after the colonial era. Although this is only beginning, it's the beginning of scientific journey in terms of proving that somehow music and language are received differently in the brain. Our musicians have also long recognized the power of language in liberation movements as well as uniting the continent. I would like to elaborate on this by referring to a project that started as a music project, but turned out to be a combination of an analysis of music and language and how certain compromises had to be made. And this is what I refer to as the struggle. So not necessarily the struggle in terms of how Mkhonto Sizwe liberated people. I'm talking about the struggle of language. And I will close off by indicating how this music was a liberation tool and somewhat aided in the integration. So the person I'm talking about is, the composer is Joshua Pudumo Mohapelwa, who was born in 1908 and died in 1982 from Lesotho. He authored over 200 songs or composed them in Sesotho, and we refer to them as text. Even though they look like poems, they are songs, but they are written in a language, in Sesotho. And he started around 1920, and he was writing until his death in 1982. So whereas there are many other Basotho composers before Mohapelwa developed a model of recycling hymns from church, obviously, folk songs, folk tales in Sesotho. And this is not unique to Mohapelwa. However, the extent to which this process evolved is what makes his contribution notable. His contribution to choral music and the development of Sesotho as a language was noted at the time of his death, where he was introduced as an honorable member of the Organization of Sesotho Writers, which started in 1961. And this is according to Lesedinyana la Sesotho, dated the 29th of January, 1982. So this project that I'm referring to started around 2009. I was still here at UCT when Professor Christian Lucia approached me about doing some translations from Sesotho to English. So the primary aim of the project was to make choral music available by transcribing the music from tonic solfa into staff notation. I joined the project as a translator, but also as a linguist with training in theoretical linguistics. The focus here was on the phonemic structure of Sesotho, the morphology and later semantics. The original texts were extracted and translated into English. Some of the texts he had translated himself. The initial project was a morpheme by morpheme translation, kind of where we were breaking words into morphemes, because that's how they appeared on the notation. And this was necessary since these were translated into a different notation, so it needed to reflect the original text. So starting with the linguistic aspect of Mohapelwa's compositions, in his early compositions, Mohapelwa dropped a lot of vowels and consonants. Most of his compositions were from shared songs, communal songs and hymns and stories and so on. So as such, listeners were familiar with the words. But also in speech, as we speak, we tend to omit some of the sounds and sometimes even consonants, even full syllables. So at first, we actually thought this is what was happening, that he was preparing this so that it sounds the way people speak. But upon a closer look, maybe I should sing. So as we look closer, we also remember that the notation that he was using was adopted from a Western system that was meant for European languages. So these languages, such as English, have a syllable structure that's very different from Sesotho. So the syllable structure in English, the basic one is CVC, and then in Sesotho, the basic syllable structure is CV. So a C is a consonant like ba, and a vowel is like a, like ba. So that's why they say my name with Mentoa instead of Ma Ntwa, which is how it is in Sesotho. So with that struggle, with the system that's Western, and a Sesotho language that has a completely different structure, he was forced to drop the vowels at the end of some syllables so that they take the shape of the notation, which is based on European languages. So it ended up being a CVC instead of CV. So basically contracting two syllables into one. And with that done, then it meant that he was compromising the text, because there were instances where he was forced to do this, even where in natural speech that wouldn't happen. So the language was colonized at that point. The second stage was an obvious and conscious decision to make sure that his language was not compromised for the sake of the foreign rhythm and the tune. So from 1935 to 1976, his music increasingly leaned towards favoring text over rhythm. So he wanted to make sure that he stays true to the language. And besides seeing this less truncations in his work, Mohapelo also produced music that was less reliant on folk music and hymns. So he was actually moving away from the roots that were taken even in literature, where if you were writing about something else other than folk stories and nature, your work would be censored. So he started moving away from that. Mohapelo also produced music that was, his intentions, he says, was to reinvigorate the Basotho nation. And he claimed that by ensuring that the melody of the song does not divert badly from the line of speaking voice, that's the language, not just the speaking voice, but the language. This makes us avoid the criticisms associated with the transgressions of speech found in foreign songs. We have also tried to Sothoize the songs by following the Sesotho rhythm here and there, using assimilation and consonants. Okay, I've got 22 seconds, right? So popular in the final compromise on his side was to ensure that the notation does not offend the language of Basotho. The next stage, this is the last one, is that he prioritized language over musical expressions as it was witnessed in his earlier productions. According to Lucia and Moutinyani 2013, they note that after 1976, his songs had almost no elisions, so there were no vowels dropped. The question that we ask ourselves was, to what extent were the earlier versions driven by musical considerations? Perhaps we missed that from the onset. If my colleague, who's a music specialist, was here, she would elaborate on that a little bit. Now, going to the last point, I've skipped some things here. He was a patriotic, and we know that he was writing about nature and Lesotho and folk stories and all that. But when you really listen to his, or when you read and listen to what he was writing about, it wasn't just about nature. For example, Moutinyani is a rabbit or hare. And this one says, Tlholoki Moutinyana, Ampesa Kasibutswi, Kamesa Abutswa. In simple terms, they banned us. We didn't fry. We are still here. Yes, we stand. So, with those words, I'm just reminding us that through song travels across oceans, and it lands in the hearts of those who come across it. Pula.
Africa. My audience is, my audience, I'm not sure what happened. Huh? Yes. Pondolayo. Izwa imita. Da. I think this is a prayer song. It's different from Kosisigele. This one is, it's still the same, but this one, remember, it's more of a prayer. It's deep. And for me to sing that song and can't even pick it up. The reason why I'm singing this song is from what Professor Moutinyani was saying, that, even though authors were not allowed to write about or even sing about something that would be against the oppressors, but they found ways through which, they could still, apply, their feelings and say, even the folk tales about, the song, Piso ya Nyana, you can see, the government structure that existed, even though it was about birds and then all forms of birds in there. So music has forever been, a vehicle through, the struggle, communication, therapy. That's why this song that I just sang, I was saying to you, it's totally different. So, Kosi singeleli Africa. The meaning say, Kosi singelela. Africa. Malupanganyisu ondolwayo izwa imitandazo izwa imitanda. Hear our prayers, while we being. Well, let's not go there. All right. So, maybe because we are sitting, music doesn't go with sitting. Yeah, it's more depressing if you sing like that. So right now, I'm going to call, he is not a linguist, he is a politician. Of course, we know language and politics as well. They go hand in hand together, and politics are everywhere. Politics, you find politics everywhere. I'm going to call upon Professor John Okpari. He is the professor in the Department of Political Studies here in Cape Town. He obtained his PhD from Dalhousie University in Canada. Professor Okpari had previously taught in Dalhousie, I hope I pronounced it correctly, University, St. Mary's University, both in Canada, and the National University of Lesotho. He has researched and published a number of articles in reputable international journals on Africa, especially on Africa's international relations, civil society, democratization, foreign policy, globalization, that's English for you. The minute you can't get it right, you get stuck, But if it was my language, I could have just gone smoothly. International relations. Yeah, English is never friendly. Civil society, democratization. No, I went back. Okay. Regional integration, conflicts, and on Africa's political economy and development. Prof, there's so much nationalization and in here, that's why I got stuck. Globalization, democratization, yeah. Okay, Prof, the stage is yours. You can bring the water. Thank you.
Vice Chancellor, who is following developments here online, Chair, Dean of Humanities, Professor Casey, fellow panelists, excuse me, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a pleasure to be part of the celebration this morning and then to talk about language and liberation. But as I have been introduced, I am not an expert on language, neither am I on music. And I thought the chair was unfair to me. He ought to have made me sit among the audience and to listen to the experts on language, on Kiswahili, and thereafter invite me up here for me to express my lay person's views. But anyway, in terms of synopsis, what I plan to do is essentially to look at the origins of Pan-Africanism and the impact it has on liberation and decolonization, and thereafter share some thoughts on the extent to which language can assist in entrenching the ideals of Pan-Africanism and regional integration. So, my starting point is this, that this week we celebrate Africa's month with various activities, including this panel discussion on language. All this meant to celebrate the birth of the Organization of African Unity. But historically, all these are traceable to the 5th Pan-African Congress held in Manchester in October 1945. And I am mentioning this for the sake of our students and for other members who might be interested in understanding how the whole notion of Pan-Africanism actually emerged. Now, just a little digression, between 1900 and 1945, that is to say during the interwar period, a group of people, mainly Africans in the diaspora, and some nationalists and anti-colonial activists frequently met in Europe. They started from 1900, etc. Those are history, and almost every year or every 2 years, they met to think about affairs of Africa. But the 5th Congress of these people, which was held in Manchester in October 1945, was very significant for at least 2 reasons. The first reason has to do with the kind of resolutions that were adopted. And here there were 3 important resolutions that were adopted in 1945 by these nationalists. The first one was that for the first time, the Congress demanded political independence for colonies under European rule. Number 2, that for the first time, the Congress articulated the notion of African unity. And thirdly, the Congress sought to promote Africa's solidarity. And by African solidarity, I mean a process in which the adversities of one country in Africa is seen to be the adversities of the whole continent. And in fact, Mbeki, in a recent meeting in Tanzania, at the time that Zimbabwe's crisis were mounting and the country came under Western sanctions, Mbeki told fellow heads of states in Dar es Salaam in a meeting that, quote, "The attack on Zimbabwe is an attack on us all," unquote. This essentially tells us about what the nature of African solidarity is. But the second reason why I think the Pan-African Congress is important, of which we need to know has to do with the caliber of delegates in that meeting. The delegates, in fact, were made up of prominent people some of who eventually led their countries into independence or were directly or indirectly related to the eventual liberation of their countries. And they included Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya, you probably might have heard that name, Hassan Banda of Malawi, Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, whose name was mentioned, Obafemi Awolowo, who was a Nigerian nationalist, and of course, Peter Abraham, who was a South African-born novelist, journalist, and political commentator. Peter Abraham was, his father was an Ethiopian, but the mother was a colored here, and he was born here. So he was part of the victims of oppression and had to write. And I recall in the 1970s at my O level, we used his book, Tell Freedom, as our literature book. So when I read it, that was the very first time as a schoolboy that I came in contact with the realities of apartheid. But anyway, but besides these African nationalists, there were also some who were from the diaspora, and they included W.E.B. Du Bois from West Indies, Marcus Garvey, and Ami Sherwood Garvey, also from West Indies. And Ami Sherwood Garvey is important here because the literature on Pan-Africanism don't often mention the role of women. But the records actually indicate that it is Ami who, in fact, influenced the husband, Marcus Garvey, and so on. And then, of course, we have Dudley Thompson, also from Jamaica. So because of these resolutions, it generated a desire for decolonization and for African unity. But the formation of the African Unity in 1963 was preceded by some divisions that occurred among African leaders. And this was because even though the leaders desired for unity, they didn't agree on how the unity was to come about. And this division found expression in the emergence of three blocks or three perspectives. One was called the Radical Casablanca Group, made up of Nkrumah, Mali, and Egypt, who thought that Africa must just establish what should be called a United States of Africa with one capital, one president, one central command, etc., etc. Then there was also a second group called the Moravian group. Apparently they met in Liberia, Moravia, and they were a little more conservative. They thought that no, it is too early to unite Africa on those lines. Rather, let's begin unity from regional, at sub-regional levels. And then, of course, there was a group that I may describe as quite ambivalent, that was sandwiched between these two extreme poles, and with Muslim countries from Central Africa. They were French, and they didn't seem to have an idea of what exactly they wanted, even though they loved African unity. So the OAU that was eventually formed in 1963 was a compromise between the two extreme blocs. And the basic objectives of the OAU, Organization for African Unity, were essentially a restatement of the ideals of Pan-Africanism, namely to decolonize the continent, promote African unity, promote African solidarity, and then to protect the territorial integrity of the states. But of course, just in brief, there have been a lot of criticisms about the OAU, which actually led to its transformation into the AU. But the point to note here is that the OAU was not designed for any of the challenges that Africa faced in the post-colonial era. For example, it was not designed to promote human rights and gender issues. It was not designed to promote democracy or good governance, nor was it designed to protect the environment or resolve intra-African conflicts. In fact, it was essentially meant to seek the rapid decolonization of Africa. And so when, after 1994, South Africa became independent from apartheid, the OAU lost relevance, became obsolete, and became anachronistic. Yeah. So there was then a need to either replace this body or transform it into one which is more suited to deal with Africa's post-colonial and post-Cold War challenges. And so the AU, African Unit or African Union, was officially made to replace the 39-year-old OAU in July 2002. And so essentially the objectives of the African Union was to promote the ideals of Pan-Africanism. And here I talk about African unity, I talk about solidarity, and I talk about regional integration. And then to deal with the multiple challenges of globalization, including repositioning Africa in an increasingly competitive global system, and also to promote good governance, democracy, human rights, gender equality, and to protect the environment, as well as ending anti-developmental tendencies such as corruption, nepotism, and all those vices that are affecting Africa now. But finally, also to seek Africa's development through managing and terminating conflicts and establishing global partnerships for accelerated development. So, so we can actually claim, we can actually argue here without any risk of error that the OAU/AU were a direct offshoot of Pan-Africanism. Now, a further part of Pan-Africanism was regional integration, which Prof. spoke about at some point. And now, regional integration is being touted as the only viable path for Africa to development. And various arguments have been made to defend this opinion, including the fact that Africa has fragmented and small markets, and that there is the need to expand intra-African trade, which currently stands at a paltry 18%, compared to 68% and 58% in Europe and Asia, respectively. In recent years, conflict has come to form part of the agenda of regional integration, as Africa has become a continent notorious for conflict, turmoil, and instability. So the idea of integration is therefore to create opportunities for the regional and continental mobilization of resources for development and for promoting social cohesion. And by social cohesion, I mean, whilst we are diverse in culture, language, tribes, religion, gender, nationality, Africans can still share common purpose and a common vision. So the rhetorical question now here is whether regional integration has indeed fostered the ideals of Pan-Africanism. Perhaps this is a topic for another discussion. Now I want to turn my attention to language, and I'm running out of time. And I indicated earlier that Pan-African, I would probably say that Pan-Africanism is the mother, integration is the baby, and language is one of the foods required to feed and nourish the baby. It should be added that without food, the baby suffered from malnutrition, stunted growth, and possibly death. But evidence from Africa suggests that countries with common languages tend to cohere. In fact, linguistic homogeneity tends to provide a stronger unifying force than religion, I will suggest. Pan-Africanism emphasizes the establishment of societies devoid of destructive contestations, intolerance, and, if you like, Afrophobia. The importance of language can therefore not be overemphasized. And Professor already talked about the importance of language, and especially Kiswahili. And here I want to single out Tanzania as a good example of a country priding itself of stability, social cohesion, and brotherly love because of the use of Kiswahili as a national language, as a lingua franca. So far, Tanzania is one of the few countries in Africa that has remained conflict-free, united, and tolerant. And it might interest you to know that until the huge influx of African immigrants into South Africa after 1994, Tanzania was the highest recipient of African refugees fleeing their countries because of wars of liberation. Moreover, as a language widely spoken in East Africa, of course, Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Burundi, Rwanda, and I didn't even know that DRC was part of this. Kiswahili has helped promote linguistic communication in the region. Therefore, the region enjoys relative peace. It thus makes a lot of sense to consider language as a unifying force in an otherwise socially fractured continent of Africa. Perhaps other regions could consider the adoption of common languages. And I'm not entirely sure at this point which languages are more widely spoken in SADC or in Central Africa for adoption. However, for ECOWAS or for West Africa, Hausa is definitely the choice, as it is it's spoken almost in every West African country. Of course, in addition to the colonial languages of French, English, and to some extent, Portuguese. Yeah, but yet, with the risk of being labeled an Afro-pessimist, I should state that there is a limit to which the argument about common language can be pushed. Somalia is a homogeneous country by African standards. Its population speaks the same language and share the same religion. Yet, since the past 3 decades, it has been grappling with violence and has lacked a stable central government. Similarly, our own nearby here is Lesotho, which is homogeneous with with one language, and is predominantly Christian by religion. Yet, Lesotho has witnessed one of the most violent post-election conflicts in Africa. Now, at the same time, heterogeneous states like Zambia, Ghana, South Africa, just to name a few, have been able to avoid conflicts. And at the regional level, the European Union, ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, the Latin American and Caribbean Economic System, CELA, NAFTA, the North Atlantic Free Trade Association, the Union of South American Nations, etc., all these regional formations have avoided conflict, even though they had a multiplicity of languages. So what do these examples tell us? They tell us a couple of things, and I'm going to conclude on this one. That, number one, the relation between language on the one hand, stability or development on the other is inconclusive. It's just like the old and familiar debate we had in the 1990s about whether democracy could promote development. And various research actually showed that the relation was inconclusive. Now, the second thing we learn from these examples is that while a common language may be necessary, it's not a sufficient condition for regional stability, peace, or development. And third, that additional conditions are required to ensure peace, stability, and development. And these conditions, I would suggest, will include the elimination of conditions that will generate what I describe as distributional conflicts, or conflicts that arise out of distribution, and so on. And four, we have to learn from these examples that each region in Africa is unique in some ways, and proposals recommending the adoption of a regional language should only be made with some caution. Thank you. Okay, please. Yeah.
Why am I singing these songs? What language? I think I sang about 3 songs. What language are in those songs? No, be specific. We sang 3 songs. They are in one language. They are not in one language. All right. Now we're going somewhere. Okay. They are South African, yes, of course they are our songs, but these are the songs that when they are sang, it doesn't matter where, everybody sings the song. There's never an argument about what language they sing and they, in unison. So right now I have, I think I have 7 minutes of the questions to our panelists. I'm going to ask my team to play the video of my last panelist at 11:30. Then you can play the video. But for now, I'm going to take comments, I'm going to take questions from my audience, any form of contribution. I'll take some hands. Yes, I recognize you. They'll be giving, yeah, there's a hand there. You can shoot.
Thank you for the opportunity. My question goes to Professor Mutembe regarding Kiswahili. When you were speaking, you made mention of the fact that Kiswahili is not an ethnic language. It came as a necessity. I don't know if I'm right with that. I'm trying to find out, is that the reason why it was easy to be adapted and was successful? Because you realize that people are attached to their language. Ethnicity goes with language, and people will not want to lose their language because they believe once a language is adopted as an official language, it gains some kinds of dominance over other people. Could this have been one of the reasons? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. When I said that Swahili is a linguist, no man's land language, I meant that the quality of Kiswahili to be a convergence language of dialects, right? It combines several languages, and a language of, that accommodates words and phrases and culture, values and philosophies from other languages. That's why it was easily accepted. And it is Bantu language. Like if one speaks here from Zulu or Iskosa or Sepedi or any Nguni language, and I speak my mother tongue, which is not Swahili, we could understand each other. And it's like also Swahili. So I would have even said that when I hear Miriam Makeba's song, Malaika Nakupenda, or Hapo Zamani, sikuwa hivi, I don't think of Miriam Makeba as South African. Actually, I think of Makeba as Swahili, even the word itself. So to me, Swahili was successful because of that kind of accommodation. And by the way, Swahili is more closer to Hausa than Hausa is to Igbo or Yoruba. So it will be easily accommodated in Nigeria, in Ghana, and so on. So that's how Swahili succeeded in East Africa.
Is that why, in Lesotho we say hauna matata and Swahili hakuna matata?
Exactly.
And mtu,
Mtu
kabantu.
Abantu, exactly.
All right. Can I take another question? There are 2 hands. In fact, I'll start with you, then behind you, and then the third and the fourth. So in that order, you just, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentations. And I think I've got a thesis of questions, but I just ask one question.
Okay.
And it will be an open-ended question. So my question poses, what role can academics play in the localization of African languages? What role can academics play in the localization of African languages, Pan-Africanism, and decolonial rhetoric? And I'm asking this question primarily because I've got a very critical understanding of academics and intelligentsia. We are having this conversation of African languages in an institution. And the concern that I have is that these conversations, they transpire in these institutions and they end in institutions. And the voice of the marginalized, the working class in the township, in the village, it's not incorporated into the space. So how can we then not only theorize from a very hyper-imagined, abstract, but also at the same time institutionalize these conversations in our townships, in our homesteads.
Okay. Let me take all the questions and then you note them down. Yeah, next.
It's on. Oh, yeah. Mulweni, yeah, I think there's a book called Buzane Kubawa that's going to be written by the grade 12 students. And then they are doing it as a play to help them understand, to have an actual vision of the story. So now because I was watching it yesterday, after the acting has been done, the cast sits and then asks the students who have seen the show, asks them questions that are going to be there in the exam. And the students had troubles of organizing a whole entire sentence in isiXhosa, and they're going to write the book in isiXhosa. They incorporate words from English, and they struggle because now they feel awkward because they have to organize this sentence in isiXhosa, and then these kids are going to write this thing in an exam. So I think with that, my question comes to ask, is there a future of language? By saying a future of language, the language holding its, what's English about?
Yeah,
The strongness, language, but holding the richness, yeah, when you speak Sesotho, you're gonna bua without having to incorporate other languages, especially languages that are very much foreign, or the languages that were enforced onto us. So I think this question revolves around the fact that we are running away from where the Kalfas died, because we have an issue of neocolonialism in the continent. Whatever we're trying to do, we're going to revolve around this thing instead of breaking the house down and building it from Yeah, I think if we speak from there, the start, because throughout history there have been talks of decolonization. 2015 we did not start with the talks of decolonization. It's been there, but now, each and everything that we do is gonna be diluted because we are running away from the actual.
I think my panel got it right. Did you get that?
No, in China. No, the question I'm trying to understand. There was, but there was not in between. But the question is, with also Abanduana struggling to construct a sentence in their own languages, what's the future of our languages? Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, Bagana. Next. Yeah, English sometimes fails us. You know, something would just be but then,
I'm heard. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, this question is for Professor Mutembe. The gentleman behind me talked about we may have problems if we use one language like Swahili, because we all have our languages, and a lot of people are not going to agree to that. But I have a problem with that myself, because the English language is made up of, is a conglomerate of all the European languages. You hear French in English, you hear Dutch in English, you hear all kinds of languages, you hear German in English. But now when we want to do something to use a language that can unify us, we have a problem. And we, all of us sitting here, we've gone to school. We speak our own languages, but the language that we speak for business, that has become pivotal, is an English language, which is a conglomerate of all the European languages. Why is that?
Let me take the last question, you behind, and then what I'll do, there's two of you sitting close to each other. They'll be the last ones. Then we'll go to the presentation. Then after presentation, I'll come back to the discussions. So those two, and then you respond, and then we'll go to the presentation.
Thank you. My name is Sabake Matlangu. So I got two questions. And I'm approaching this from the practical level. from the practical level. Language can be taught at school. But for the language to live, ukuthi iphile on a day-to-day basis, it must be integrated with what people do or the activities. Whether you go to church, you go play soccer, the language must be there all the time. Otherwise, that language is likely to die or be spoken of only exclusively. And I'm talking about language need to be used in business, in churches and all of that. So I'd like you to just comment on how do we practically implement this language like Kiswahili, especially for the purpose of social cohesion. Because if it is going to be an exclusive or once spoken, it would not help us. So I'm approaching this from a very, very practical perspective. Yes, the government can prescribe it and then we can speak it in class, but then thereafter, how do we do it practically? Okay, so the last question is, now this is slightly broad, is around activities on social cohesion. It could include the language. Africans, do they speak with each other? Do they interact with each other? And I'm not talking about those Africans from other countries that are currently in South Africa. No, I'm just saying that, you see, from my personal experience, I hardly find a simple thing, a forum where Africans are speaking. Let's say, for example, small businesses across Africa, where you could either join or some forum activities. It's not there. So you hardly find a forum that would include various African countries in the same forum talking about particular issues. So I'd like you to just kind of comment on that, because we still live our lives in boundaries. I'm in South Africa, I only interact with people in South Africa.
Yeah.
So the people in other countries, again, they are not part of my life.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, they got that. It's Africa Day and you can't cut Africans. That's the tough decision you can ever think of doing. Yes, please.
I want to invite Professor Akpopari to reflect with me on this reflection or comment. So I'm a master's student at the sociology department. I'm working on a curriculum decolonization. And one of my participants shared their thoughts with me about language, not Kiswahili, but isiXhosa. In the sense that if an African lecturer or a student is going on an exchange program in Germany or maybe France, if that engagement would be beyond 6 months, especially if it is 1 year, you must learn Germany. There would be some restrictions, there would be some institutional limitations, such that if you don't learn that home language, you won't fit into that society. Like, it will just be impossible.
Yeah.
Those things are there, you won't integrate, you won't be united, and that would kind of encourage you to learn the language. And that person was, we were reflecting, because I'm doing an interview with them, in the sense that this is UCT, Africa foremost and best university. Why is it that a lecturer can be hired by UCT and maybe they continue to teach for 10 years and there won't be institutional encouragement or policies that will enforce it? Not enforce, but that would ensure that they learn isiXhosa. Again, the future of our language. There are no specified places, there are no encouragement, there are no support. Like, somebody can be in UCT, can spend 35 years in UCT, and there won't be any need for them to learn isiXhosa. And this is an isiXhosa place.
Yeah.
So I'm just...
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm inviting Professor Akpopari, I think this has a lot to do with politics. again, politics of language. How can we make UCT put in, institutions and mechanisms that would make foreigners, that would make them learn isiXhosa? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let me give my panelists a chance to respond. So over to you, my panelists. I think in that order, we can start from you, Prof, going to the gentleman.
Yeah, thank you very much. I want to combine 3 questions and have one answer. The localization, the future of our language, and then English is a combination of European languages. What about African? Maybe even the last question here. We at the University of Dar es Salaam, we are doing a research now basing on a practical experience of teaching Kiswahili using indigenous African languages. We went to KwaZulu-Natal, we went to Zimbabwe, and in Namibia. I was in Namibia 2011, and then to KwaZulu-Natal the same year, and then in 2012, I was in Zimbabwe. And we found out that although there was support and people attempted to learn Swahili, but when we changed the paradigm, right, to start teaching Swahili using isiZulu, in other words, the Zulu people saw in it the survival of their language, okay, as a connection, but also one language that will unify Africans. The same is teaching Swahili using Isindebele and Shona, and so on and so forth. I understand that there are some challenges where you have a multiple languages. Which language do you choose? Well, we are dealing with that, but I wanted to give you a practical way of how we are doing now. And in so doing, actually, Swahili is not a threat, but a language that will also, on one way or the other, attempt to revive the language. We all know that even without Swahili, our children and our grandchildren do not speak a mother tongue. Why? Because you don't use them. Why? Because we are dealing with the colonized mind. That's why in my talk, I refer to Ngugi wa Thiong'o, decolonization of mind, so that our kids would like to learn isiXhosa, for instance, would like to learn Sepedi. But why don't you teach one language that unites us through Sepedi, and so you know that this one will survive for years to come. Swahili is also now going into science. We have mathematics, biology, physics, chemistry, and so on into Kiswahili, trying to tap the example of linguistic liberation in Malaysia, where they started with the Bahasa Malay. That said, I'm not against French or Portuguese or English, or Chinese for that matter. These are very important international languages, but I'm saying they should not define our identity. Thank you. To my other panels.
Oh, okay, sure. I'm glad I didn't say anything. My student, I think I did a bad job. Yes, you go around circles when you're supposed to ask a question. Okay, on the localization of African languages and what academics are doing, I think people have a misconception about what academics do. We don't prescribe, we describe. So we study what language in connection to how it's used in society. So it's not a top-down system where we decide that this is what is happening and then it trickles down to the communities. No, we actually study language in the way that it is used. And that ties in with the next question about what the future of our languages are. There are two schools of thought. One is that we tend to want to preserve our languages and want them to be spoken in the way that they were spoken in 1900. And we are in 2021 now. 22, yes, sure. I went a year back. So the future of the languages are in the speakers, in the hands of the speakers of these languages. So the second aspect of this evolution of language is that we need to allow our languages to grow and embrace the spaces where they are used and spoken. If we insist on our students speaking like Kai in 2022, we are going to end up with a lot of resistance because the languages do not appeal, they are not familiar to them. Hence, you see studies now that look at CT languages. There are lots of people who are looking at the language spoken in the Rustenburg area. It has a name. We have other ones like Swanglish and so on and so on. And as long as we frown upon those, we are going to end up with a situation where we think, English is the only way. English is evolving, by the way. It's not standing still. Why do we want our languages to stand still? Thank you.
Yeah, Prof, just briefly, and then we'll play the video, and I think I'll cut my closing. Yes, Prof. Hubert.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I am going to combine the first question, which relates to the role of academics in localizing indigenous languages, in a way related to what is the future of indigenous languages, and then I'll combine that as well with the last question. Now, my starting point is that no academic curriculum is neutral. Every academic curriculum has to receive the approval of the state. And I am not trying to shift blame from academics to the state. And those of you who have at some point heard about Karl Marx, who talked about the superstructure and substructure, he believed that whatever happens, the philosophies, the music, the doctrines, whatever we teach in society, in schools, is constitute what he called the superstructure. And that is actually based, its foundation is the substructure, which is the economic base. Essentially, what I'm saying is that much of this has to do with the prescriptions of the state. But I'm happy that at the beginning of the talk this morning, the Vice Chancellor indicated plans to institute Swahili as a language of learning or as a subject in UCT. So the point I'm essentially making is that in as much as that academics who personally want to introduce some local languages in the curriculum, it has to be funded, it has to be, there are all sorts of things related to that. Now, in relation to the future of indigenous languages, I personally fear, like the questioner, that in due time, some indigenous languages may die because of globalization, Americanization, the way, the kind of things we do. Even now, some cultures are going to die because we sing songs, more Western songs than our local songs. I went to my village in Ghana sometime, and I was listening to a 4-year-old baby child. He was singing English songs, these rock songs and stuff like that, and could not sing a local language. So I think that is a threat we are facing. So, and again, perhaps it has to come back to the kind of policies that we put in place to protect these languages. Then in terms of the last question, which expressed a concern that international students come here and they're not made to learn the local languages. I think it is a fact. And I studied in Japan for my master's. In the first semester, we were asked to take language lessons in Japanese. So at least you have to do at least level 1 Japanese. And in fact, foreign students were even encouraged to learn up to level 6, which is the highest, and be able to write their thesis, their master's thesis, in Japanese. I couldn't do that, but I learned up to level 1. So today, if you take me to Tokyo and leave me on the street, I'll find my way and leave you there. I can take a train, etc. So I think it is an important, and maybe it's something that our politicians must, and the educational authorities must pay heed to. I think it is just nice. I have been here for about 19 or 20 years, and I still can't speak. It's because, I mean, it's bad. I feel very bad. My children can speak, I can speak. But I think it's good that we introduce some level of education in those local languages, especially for foreigners. And this helps in the integration of these students into the wider society. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You can play the video. I knew that this one would be, the discussions. I wish we had more time where I can take more questions. While they're still playing Dr. Guzula, let me introduce her to you. Is a lecturer in applied language and literacy studies with a focus of multilingual and multiliteracy education at the University of Cape Town. She specializes in multilingual education, especially in teaching children how to read and write in 2 or more languages. She's one of the founders of a network of reading clubs growing across the country, starting from the Vilindlela reading clubs to Nalibali reading clubs. She has written several children's books, including the recent series of Mbokoto, Women Who Shape Us, and has translated many children's books from English to Xhosa. She is a member of Bua Lit Language and Literacy Collective, working on social justice in language and literacy education.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dorothy Massouga. I am from the School of Education, University of Cape Town. I work in the area of applied language and literacy studies with a particular focus on multilingual education and multiliteracy education. And I feel honored to have been asked to take part in this panel, which is about Africa Day, and with a focus on language and music and their role in the liberation and integration of Africa. The topic that I've been given is a topic about African languages, translanguaging, and decolonization. So yes, in the School of Education, I think, as you will remember, that the recent student protest of the Rhodes Must Fall movement and Fees Must Fall movement reminded us of the coloniality of our university spaces. But in terms of my own work that I do in language and literacy studies, it reminds me of how language forms part of the colonial matrix of power, which we tend to ignore because we do mention that there's intersectionality of class, race, and gender, but we hardly mention the role of language in this colonial language and culture in the colonial matrix of power. So the students reminded us that there's a lot that needs to be done in each of our disciplines. Now, in thinking about the role of language in the colonial matrix of power, I feel that it has been this unrecognized area in our education system. And it reminds me of the debates between Professors Ngugi wa Thiong'o and Chinua Achebe, when they discussed long ago about African literature and what African literature entailed. Is it literature written in Africa by Africans? Is it literature written in English or African languages? And we know that their stances were different. Ngugi believed that African literature will be literature that is written in African languages, whereas Chinua Achebe talked about African literature that we could own English and appropriate it and make it our own, and that we could translate our African experience in English, so long as we make English our own English, not necessarily the Queen's English. So there was always this dilemma between us working in English or working in African languages, which I think in the work that we do, we actually try and solve that binary by saying we don't need either or, we need both English and African languages. Also, we know that we know that an African writer, a well-known African writer, Chimamanda Adichie, also talked about whether writing in English was a choice for her, and she said English is not a choice because the schools that we all go to are English schools. Therefore, the expectation is that everybody should be working in English. So she's one of those African writers who was taught in English and has now ended up writing in English. So it was not a choice. So coming to education more generally, we know, especially in literacy as well, we know that colonial languages continue to dominate the education system, and that for proficiency, in European language and script, that is seen as a sole marker of being educated. So if you don't speak English well, you are seen as an uneducated person. So in South Africa, it is proficiency and literacy practices in particular forms of English that are often perceived as exclusive marker of being educated. We also know that the Western epistemology says that it is responsible for this kind of thinking, that only knowledge that comes in English is superior than any other knowledge that comes also in other African languages. So in literacy, we are concerned with the linguistic and cultural hierarchy privileging European languages, particularly English, and to some extent Afrikaans. We are also concerned with the hierarchy privileging Western knowledge and cosmology. For example, we ask, where are the oral literacies? Where do they fit in the definition of literacy? Where does where do multimodal approaches to literacy fit in? Multimodal approaches, which also include music as a form of communication, which are ignored in the teaching of literacy because a Eurocentric notion of literacy says that you should have an ability to read and write. And if you don't have that ability to read and write, you are seen as an illiterate. Yet we know that people have always contributed to literacy in oral forms, either in storytelling, in poetry performances, in music, in different art forms. But I want now to go back to a brief history of the use of African languages in education, starting from maybe from the 1900s, where the African languages were not seen as important because the colonialists made sure that they make their languages official and use them in education and in all spheres of administration in the ruling of South Africa. So we know with the Union of 1910 that the Afrikaners and the English used English and Afrikaans as the sole official languages of the country, and to show that cooperation between them. In 1925, they then used these languages in a dual medium way, where education was to be offered for Afrikaans and English children in two languages by a bilingual teacher who could speak English and Afrikaans, just to strengthen that cooperation between the Afrikaners and the English. And at that time, African languages were not seen as important at all, even though literacy was starting to grow in the 1900s, seeing African writers writing, like we know Omqhayi, we know Onontsizi Mqwetho, were writing in African languages in newspapers. But these African languages, of course, were not meant to be used as mediums of instruction in education. However, the rise of Afrikaner nationalism meant that now the Afrikaners were suspicious of English, because English, there was that Anglicization period where the English wanted the Afrikaners to use their language. And so the Afrikaners were always suspicious of that. So by the 1940s, they started to do away with the dual medium education and actually wanting to work towards single medium education, where you can have an African school and teaching only in Afrikaans, and an English school teaching only in English. But then what did they do for the African languages? The Afrikaners decided, okay, because they wanted separate development of white children and like white people from black people, they then created these Bantustans, where the languages, African languages, were to be used only in the Bantustans, and there was going to be no mixing of languages. So we have isiXhosa for Eastern Cape, and we had Sepedi for Libua Homo for Libua, and we had for different places, different languages, like in KZN, you would have isiZulu. So in that sense, the Afrikaners tried to work with African languages, but the only problem that came with that was that now it was coupled with Bantu education and inferior education for Black children, which meant that the curriculum was not the same for white children and for Black children. And this curriculum had to be taught in African languages. So yes, we had mother tongue education from grade 1 to grade 9, but in grade 10, the Black children chose English as their other language for going forward with education. So they chose English. But because of Afrikaner nationalism and the suspicion of English and the fear that if more Black people learn English, that meant that there were increasing numbers of English speakers and that would overpower Afrikaans, then they started to authorize dual medium education for Black children, with some subjects having to be taught in Afrikaans and some subjects having to be taught in English. And this is the root of, this kind of led to the Soweto uprisings, because now the students were rejecting the use of Afrikaans, which they didn't know how to speak and couldn't read in education. But they were also rejecting Bantu education. So they said no to Afrikaans. But in saying no to Afrikaans and saying no to Bantu education, it also meant that they were rejecting Bantu, the languages that were used to teach that Bantu education, which were African languages. So by 1979, we see a reduction of the years in which African languages are used in education as mediums of instruction, reduced from grade 9 to grade 3. So since 1979, we've had an education system where Black children learn in their own languages from grade 1 to grade 3, and then by grade 4, they have to take on English as a medium of instruction. And for those of us working in this field, we see it as the beginning of Anglo-normativity, the expectation which Professor Carolyn McKinney defines as the expectation that everybody should be and will be English, and if they are not, they are deviant or deficient. So that's how English gained its popularity and became a norm. But also English was seen as a language of the liberator, compared to Afrikaans, which was seen as language of the oppressor. So when English started to be seen as this language of the liberator, then everybody started to have this belief and ideology about English as being the most important language, the liberating language, then circulated amongst the whole Black community, and people started to value more English as a medium of instruction in schooling. And now we know since then the results of our matric have dropped a great deal from what they were in 1972, when I think Kathleen Yuch talks about that, and how the results were in the 72-75%, and they got reduced to much more. Now we see that only maybe 30% or 38% of our students are passing, and not everybody. And we get these students coming to universities and struggling to learn in English, struggling to make meaning in English, but also desiring it, desiring English because it's an important language that has benefits for social upward social mobility. So people choose it. So because people choose it, then it's so difficult now to say no to English, but also we can't say no to African languages because African languages are so much more useful in meaning making. And we see students, when they're outside classrooms, speaking in African languages, trying to explain concepts to each other in African languages. And we've seen from the research also done by Paxton and done by Professor Madiba here at UCT, showing how the maths students and the economics students, when they were given a chance to use Chivenda, and other African languages like isiXhosa, the students were feeling much more at home in using those languages in learning. But I just want to draw a contrast with music in that while we rejected use of African languages for learning, on the other hand, we had African singers, using their languages, for liberating us, because music wasn't just important for entertaining, but it was also used as a tool to fight colonialism, to fight apartheid, and it was also maybe for therapy also, because those were stressful moments of living under oppression. So it was therapy, it was entertainment, it was also passing on messages about the condition of our oppression. So I'll use an example. For example, Dr. Atambile Masola and myself have just released books called Imbokodo Books, where we write about 30 women writing women's histories, historiographies from 1800s, and one book is dedicated to writers that liberated us, to artists who used their art, both visual and performative, in terms of music. It liberated us. And in writing about these books, we show how musicians like Brenda Fassie sang songs. I mean, if you remember, Black President became a hit not only in South Africa but in other African countries. But I want to talk more about Dorothy Massouga, who was one of African singers who sang multilingually, and she was a national treasure in South Africa and Zimbabwe. She spent more time in South Africa than in Zimbabwe, but she traveled in many other African countries, fighting colonialism and oppression in those countries. And she got us thinking about apartheid through her music. She was a proud Pan-Africanist with a deep sense of social and political awareness. So I just want to quote just want to talk about how, in fact, in 1961, she wrote, she opposed the Prime Minister, D.F. Malan, in her song D.F. Malan, and she recorded an album called Lumumba, which questioned who actually murdered the Congolese leader, Patrice Lumumba. And what she said, for me, is also showing how music was used as a tool to fight for our liberation. She said, "I never held a gun, but my voice was as powerful as the gun." And it took me a few moments to send my revolutionary messages home to millions of people. When I sang Tinogara Musango, that's in Shona, it means we live in the bush. When I sang that song at DF Malan, it was like being with the people. But the contrast now is that in education, we don't see people. I mean, if you think about Dorothy Massouga's song being sung by other musicians like Thandiswa Mazwai, like Miriam Makeba and others. We know Miriam Makeba sang the Ayo song by Dorothy Massouga, which is Pata Pata. And she sang it in an African languages, taking it from another African languages. That shows us that there's a lot of building on each other if we could do the same for education. Taking knowledges from each other offered in different African languages and translating them into other African languages, and having this mutual sharing of knowledge and knowledge building in our African languages. But that hasn't happened because for some reason we see music as a cultural thing that has been that relates to the home and not to academia. And so we can sing it at home, we can sing in the community and have fun. But for things like high status functions such as education, we don't see that how we can use music as a tool for teaching literacy. We don't see how we can use our oral storytelling as part of the multimodality of multimodal ways of teaching literacy. We don't use the arts as part, and we don't see them as part of learning literacy, because literacy, as defined by Europeans, is the ability to read and write. And if you don't have that ability, it means that you are not literate. But we actually critique that, and we say we have our own oral literacies. And in fact, the written literacies build from oral literacies, because what we say, we write down and we read it again. And so we can also make art of it, or, at the beginning, so which is illustrated more in children's books, because they are so multimodal that you can find art as well as words in them, and you can also find music in many stories that are African. So now the work that I do with my colleagues has had something to do with why haven't we implemented bilingual education and use of African languages in higher education. And so our work on language ideologies shows that it is actually our beliefs and values about language that stop us from using African languages, because we believe that English is superior. So we people believe that what counts as language, so English counts as language and everything else doesn't count as language, as well as the way we use English. Whose English are we using? So if you're speaking a particular type of English that is close to white people's ways of talking English, then you are seen as good in English. But if you don't speak with that variety, then you are seen not as good. So those language ideologies circulate in society, and they are the reason why we are not implementing education in African languages. So the work that I'm doing in education with my colleagues, as we teach our PGCE courses and also honors and master's courses, is to get students to see how we can center African languages and we can fight coloniality by bringing languages together and teaching them together, in the classroom. So part of the work that I do in literacy is to get the teachers to see the connection between art and reading and writing, and to see the connection with young children of the importance of singing and importance of doing art, as well as the importance of telling stories, writing them, and reading them. So in the work that I do then, I get students to think of songs that can go with a story that they are reading. I get them to think of artwork that could go with the story, and actually to make the artwork. Because one of the things that we do, especially with my colleague Jean Jobert, who teaches art, is to make students create books that are multilingual, that are also inclusive of the art, and make puppets that are speaking different languages. In that way, we are shifting the orientation of the students from a monolingual orientation to a multilingual orientation, but also preparing them for the diverse learners that come into schools, so that when they become teachers, qualified teachers in schools, they can be able to implement multilingual strategies in the classroom to work, rather than to rely on the deficit view that comes with seeing English as only the important language and only judging people based on their English, but also seeing what resources are they bringing, these children, when they use their African languages in a learning context. Thank you very much.
Thank you, my audience. I wish we had, like the whole day to have this kind of discussions and questions, try to find some solutions to the problems that we are, or our African languages are going through. All right, so it looks like there's some goodies here.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, we're running a bit late. I just wanted to say thank you to our panelists today, and to Dr. Posa Muhuera for her facilitation. We have a small token of appreciation for them from the university. So please join me in thanking them once again, and there's lunch outside.